the little island nation of Malta, located slap bang in the centre of the Mediterranean Sea, located just 50 miles south of the Italian island of Sicily, and just 175 miles east of Tunisia. Now, located within this 120 square mile landmass, fits over 500,000 people, mostly located within Valletta, its capital city, and the surrounding other cities, townships, and villages, making it one of the most densely populated nations in Europe and also one of the smallest nations of the world. Not only is this a highly densely populated nation, it is highly densely populated, stocked full to the brim with culture and history, spanning across an 8,000-year history. So in today's video, I'm going to be going through that 8,000-year stretch of Maltese history, covering it in just 8 minutes, as a sort of a teaser, an introduction to the series of videos that I have coming up about Maltese history, from various characters, sites of significance, and important events that surround this tiny little island nation in the Mediterranean Sea. So, let's put an 8-minute timer and let's start the clock. Now, like most societies across the world, there is always a Neolithic period, a Stone Age man roaming around the countrysides, and Malta is no different. The earliest settlements, the human settlements, date back between 5,900 and 2,500 BC. What we do know about this Neolithic period is that it can be split into 2 equally sized subsections. The earliest, referred to in some cases as the Dalam period, named after the earliest site that was discovered in the 19th century, the Dalam, known as the Cave of Darkness, and the other section, which the Maltese proudly call their Temple period. Now, as a point of reference, the Temple period sits largely at the same time as when Stonehenge in England is being built, and when the pyramids of Giza in Egypt are being built. 2 very different sites, roughly around the same size. The temples of this particular Maltese era probably sit within about the centre of these 2 sections. Not as grand as a pyramid, but not necessarily as simple as a stone circle in Britain. This all came to a sudden, grinding, and mysterious halt. Nobody really knows why the people of the Temple era disappeared. Perhaps it was due to a drought. That's the most logical explanation. Maybe there was a famine, or maybe there was a disease that ravaged through the populations. Whatever the answer may be, they simply disappeared, and Malta was left uninhabited until colonizers from Sicily arrived about 200 years later, 2300 BC. The Bronze Age concludes roughly in around 700 BC, where we then find ourselves in the Phoenician era of influence. Now, what we do know about the Phoenicians comes from what the ancient Greeks tell us. They were very capable seafarers, merchants of various different goods, mostly originating from the Eastern Mediterranean, from areas in modern-day Lebanon, Syria, and Israel. They had many natural harbours and points of interest across the Mediterranean, across Europe, and across the North African coast, using Malta as a natural sort of stopgap between these various destinations. Their most prevalent point of interest was the small little fishing village of Marshallock, which is on the eastern side, funnily enough, of the island of Malta. Then you have the Romans in the 3rd century BC. In 255 BC, the Roman Republic makes their first attack on the island of Malta, but don't properly colonize the island until 218 BC, during the Second Punic Wars against Carthage, those people that lived on the North African coastline. With the fall of Rome in 476 AD came the fall of an empire. Malta sort of floated about between different parties and powers right up until the Romans' spiritual successors, the Byzantines, took back control of the island of Malta in 535 AD. Right up until 870 AD, when they were taken control of by the Alclobids of northern Africa, mostly centered around Tunisia and Libya. And an interesting fact about the Maltese language, it is a distinct mixture between the Arabic language brought over by the Alclobids in the 9th century, as well as English from much later periods of history, and its most direct neighbours, the Italians, all merged into one lovely language. And you've got your Normans and your invading Crusaders who come over, led by Count Roger of Sicily in 1091, conquers it for the Christians that they were, and it is said that the island's flag, red and white flag, was apparently Count Roger's cloak that had been torn and presented to the people of Malta. The island was run by the Kingdom of Sicily, which was a sort of sub-power to various other major European parties, like the Germans at one point, the French at another, and then towards the end of the 15th and early 16th century, the Aragonese, the Spanish. By 1530, Malta, the Kingdom of Sicily, and in turn the Spanish, came under the wide overarching rule of the Holy Roman Empire, under its most famous monarch, Charles V, who in 1530 granted this tiny little Mediterranean island to the Holy Order of the Knights of St. John, formerly the Knights Hospitaller that were founded during the time of the Crusades, and whom had been ousted from their former home of Rhodes by the Ottomans under the Sultan Suleiman. And it is from here that we get the most recognisable period of Maltese history, the most visible, from its art to its architecture, to its religious influence under the Catholic faith. 90% of today's population in Malta still consider themselves as Catholic. From the icons and the symbolism, all visible along every street across Malta in some way. But the knights are not indestructible. Napoleon Bonaparte in 1798 conquered the island of Malta on his way to Egypt for his Nile campaign. But over the next 2 years, the Maltese people were very dissatisfied, so asked the British for help. In 1800, the British took control of the island of Malta and added it as part of their ever-growing British Empire. This was until about 1964, when the Maltese people decided to declare themselves as a republic. And the last remaining pieces of British rule and British influence ended in 1979. And of course, being in the dead centre of the Mediterranean Sea during the Second World War, there was massive blitz and bombing raids done by the Axis powers of Italy and in some cases Germany as well. And it was at the centre of a lot of the North African campaign action and the invasions of Sicily in 1943. And like most powers that had come before it, the British used Malta as a sort of a stopgap, but not necessarily between areas of the Mediterranean, but between its own imperial lands, empire across in the Far East. With the opening of the Suez Canal in 1869, fast-tracked British ships towards India and the Far East. And so Malta served its purpose as a stopgap and even a relaxing place to be for British officers of the Royal Navy. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to you all, from those down the road to the folks around the world. I hope that you have enjoyed today's video on 8,000 years of Maltese history in just 8 minutes. I hope to see you in the next few videos, this series to come about the island of Malta. But for now, I wish you a great day, weekend, week, or whatever. See you later.